If we got in a time machine and went back 10, 15, 20 years ago and you and I ran into me, we would both smack them in the face and say, wake up, dummy. I grew up with the idea that success was a function of how big my salary was and how large my house was and what kind of car I drove. And so I got very focused on materialism. And at one point in my career, I was making far beyond anything I expected, and I was living in a 7,000 square foot home. And when I sat down in my office at home one day, it hit me very clearly. I had material success, but I felt empty and I did not feel rewarded. And that I had been chasing this idea of what success was, and I was completely wrong.
Welcome to the Chad Carden Podcast, where people and culture make all the difference. Our guests are real leaders that are making real impact by creating even better cultures and even better results. We're going to talk about things that most people aren't talking about. We're going to talk about things that leaders are thinking but might be scared to say. We're going to get into issues that can give you practical and tactical ways to set you up for a higher probability of success. Let's get after it. Welcome to another episode of this podcast. I'm really excited about the guest today, and we have a short amount of time. Him and I are trying to figure out schedules, but I think this is a really good introduction to Steve, and I'm going to turn over the microphone in just a minute. But you'll probably see a lot of him on these episodes, hopefully if he doesn't just ghost me after this. But here's what I'm really hoping for people to learn and understand about Steve, and what I'm excited about is he's a multifaceted guy that has many different arrows in his quiver that I think our audience can really glean from and learn from. He's an innovator. He's a disruptor, which he'll talk about. He's a leader. He's creatively thinking. He's entrepreneurial mindset, and he's always looking at ways to continuously drive impact. And from my short time of having and calling him a friend, that's what I've gathered from Steve, and he's already added so much value to my life. So, Steve, I'm excited about this, and thanks for joining me on the podcast.
It's my pleasure, Chad. And send me the invoice, man. I couldn't have a better press secretary. So I appreciate that intro. Humbly, that is way beyond anything I deserve. So thanks. I'm excited about the conversation today.
Yeah, and I know we have a short amount of time today, but again, I wanted to get the audience introduced to you because I think that you're just a very unique guy who has a very unique perspective that can add a ton of value to people watching this. So first of all, just kind of give us the background on Steve, so, kind of where you've been, what you're doing, kind of what you're doing now, which I know there's a many other things, but I just kind of give you the microphone and let you kind of just explain to us.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, what an honor to be here. Looking forward to us going on this journey together. I would say first and foremost, I'm unbelievably blessed and have a lot of gratitude. I've had amazing mentors over my career, and because of that, it's allowed, among other things, graduate of the University of Michigan. I spent my early career in public accounting on multinational clients, which was amazing. I think I've had boots on the ground between pleasure of travel and business, 45 countries in the world. Great training in public accounting on how to run a P&L. Then I've spent time in retail at the senior executive level, running at some of the most successful retailers in the country, like Meijer, where I ran their $3 billion private label as the general manager, set up our global sourcing office in Hong Kong from scratch. Worked in healthcare, worked at one of the top 30 companies in the country at Cardinal Health. Phenomenal retailer, great operating culture, very successful. Got to learn all about healthcare, pharmaceuticals. Most recently, I've been on more of an entrepreneurial kick. I was the president of a co-packaging company in Columbus, Ohio for a little while, little $30 million company. So, Chad, I've worked with, literally $140 million public companies down to a $30 million husband and wife owned company. Most recently, I've really moved into the private equity space. I've spent the last 3.5 years working for L&R Distributors out of New York. They're the largest beauty and cosmetic distributor in the United States. And what's been amazing about that is I love the pace and the expectations of private equity. We work with Platinum, which is the owners. They're phenomenal to work with. You talk about innovation, you talk about speed, you talk about taking smart risk from a leadership, from a strategy. It requires it every day, and I get up every day just energized about going to business because we're having a lot of fun. And most recently, it keeps me young. My team is a leader in TikTok and social commerce. We've got a very fast-growing, large business that we created from a dead stop 2 years ago, and we work with some of the largest and most popular CPG brands in the world running their TikTok shops for them. So I've been blessed and covered ground on a lot of different areas.
Yeah, I want to dive into that because it is interesting. I think that, when we've talked off camera, some of the things that you're doing I think it's uncharted waters, right? You're chopping down trees as you're trying to figure it out. I mean, there's been paths that have been created for you with mentors and things, but
Yeah.
the first question that comes to mind that I really want to gather from you is, you move at a very fast pace, and you are a guy that is confident enough, and I don't see that in like an arrogant way that you're arrogant, but you're confident enough to say yes to it and know that you're going to figure it out. How do you manage everything that kind of comes at you on a daily basis and make sure that it continues to move and progress in a way that you want it to move versus feeling like it's chaos all the time?
Yeah, that's such a great question. You know, I think a lot of times, and you and I talked about this at length, so I'm going to set the answer up to the question based on what you and I are trying to accomplish. We see a lot of content out in the marketplace on these kind of podcasts where people talk about what they've done, but they don't talk about why they did it and what the impact is, right? And so it's a lot of transactional activity, but not really the substance behind it.
Right.
So you and I want to show up differently, because what we ultimately want to do in these conversations is give people the right kind of fuel that they can walk away and say, well, I could do that. I could apply that. I'm not talking to somebody that does stuff I couldn't do.
Right.
So within that context, what I would say is there are 3 principles I had to learn the hard way. But when I've applied these principles, they've been able to give me the ability to take smart risks, create outcomes, and move with this speed to more often than not be successful. The first is being very intentional about risk taking. And what I mean by that is allowing yourself the moment to stop and say, okay, I want to do something. I want to make an impact that hasn't been made before, but that means that I've got to take smart risks. So am I thinking about the economic impact of what I'm working on? Am I thinking about what could go wrong? Am I aligning myself around the right kind of talent and resources and partners who can help me think critically? And I think, you know, I read incessantly, Chad, and probably one of the best books I've ever read is Great by Choice, that's in the Good to Great series. And Great by Choice is the follow-up to Good to Great, where he says the 1% of the 1% of individuals and teams and companies that perform have a couple characteristics. They shoot bullets before cannonballs. They don't bet big. They focus on what do we need to learn. And in the digital world, they got really smart in the last decade about this. You hear the idea of sprinting and using MVPs, minimal viable products. Why did they do that? Because they realized that they were doing these big SAP implementations and these big 3-year projects, and they were going way over budget. They were never delivering on time. And they began to realize that they had to be shoot bullets before cannonballs. So let's get dialed in, and then when we get it right, layer it up. So I think the first thing is you got to take smart risk, but you got to do it in a smart way. The second thing is you got to deliver results. One of the things I teach my team all the time is it's not about activity, it's about results. And too many people get talking about what they've done, not the impact they've made. So if you go after things that are undiscovered country, you're cutting through the forest where other people haven't been, and you're taking smart risk and you're driving results, that's going to lead to good things. It's going to lead to opportunities, economic benefit, new growth opportunities. And then finally, mentoring. Surround yourself with people that are smarter than you, that are more experienced. Like one of the things, Chad, I mentor a lot of people of color over my career and a lot of women. And one of the first things I tell women is definitely get a couple mentors, but one of them has to be a woman who's at least 2 levels above you, because she's going to deal with issues around sexism that as a man I'll never fully understand. So I've been very intentional. I surround myself with smart people who mentor me, and this is really key. There was a great study by Harvard that talked about what is really high performance leadership. And they said one of the mistakes that most people make is they're blind to where their shortfalls are. And you've got to have a coach who will speak truth to you about where you've got your blind spots, where you're underperforming, and work through that. You don't need to hear how great you are. You need to know where your blind spots are. And again, one of the best books that I coach and mentor people on is by Marshall Goldsmith, called What Got You Here Won't Get You There.
Yeah.
Phenomenal read. And we could dive into that in another episode, but that's the essence of it. You ask me, how do I operate at this pace? How have I been able to achieve this stuff? One, the universe has been good to me. I've just been blessed with some cool opportunities, but I've made some of those blessings by taking smart risk, having great mentors, and at the end of the day, staying focused not on the activity, but on the outcomes and the results.
Yeah, it's interesting because people maybe outside your sphere or outside your, I call it, outside the bottle, right? Not really knowing the essence of who you are, can look at somebody and going back to your original statement of saying, there's no way I can move that fast, or gosh, he probably processes 100 ideas an hour to figure this thing out. But really, when you get behind your curtain, you're really intentional and you're really methodical and you really think about these things. And it's not. And I love the fact of shooting bullets before cannons, right? It's like there's not just a spray and pray approach. There is a formula behind this that I'm sure you have gathered and gained and perfected over the years. But there's that formula that allows you to absorb all of this in a manner that is quick speed on the right things with the right risk that drive the right results that allow you to ultimately move in that path. Let me double click on mentors for a second because I'm a big fan of. I still have several mentors. I've been a mentor. How do you coach people on finding the right mentor, or you mentioned honesty. You mentioned somebody who's going to give you that kind of tough love. What are some other things that somebody should look for in a mentor if they're out there seeking it? And maybe sometimes, like you mentioned, it's just fallen in our lap, right? Just by luck or the universe treated us right. But if we're being intentional, how do we build those relationships?
Yeah, I love that question. For me, everybody always laughs when they spend time with me because I boil everything down into threes. I'll say, well, they're 3 points. But human beings are known. Our minds are programmed 7s and 3s. They're just a number we easily crunch. So 3 things here. One, oftentimes, especially people earlier in their career around mentors, mistake that it's about the title and the prestige of who I get, not the quality of what I get. And so I really focus them on get with somebody. It's like a great marriage, great relationship. Make sure there is a level of rapport there. And it's somebody you trust, somebody that will be direct with you, and somebody that you really want to hear from. And then what I also talk to them about is be very, and you and I are going to love using this word a lot, intentional.
Right.
Understand a little bit of self-evaluation. Are you struggling with strategy? Are you struggling with your interpersonal and communication skills? Are you struggling with your leadership skills? Are you struggling with your commercial skills? I've never run a P&L. I don't know how to do that. So then when you go looking for that mentor, you're being intentional about trying to find somebody who has demonstrated aptitude in that area. Because generally speaking, people are honored to be mentors. Some are good at it, some are not so good. But very rarely somebody say, no, I'm not interested in being a mentor.
Right.
And then once you get that, we've got a good rapport, you've got some things I can learn from you, then you need a structured relationship. And I often tell the mentor, you take the lead, you set the meetings up, you set the agenda up, and drive to outcomes that say really simple, 3 steps. Number 1, we're going to focus on an area. Number 2, I'm going to ask the mentor to give me advice and actions to practice. And then I go practice it and I come back and report how that went. People love to be reminded that Michael Jordan still needed coaching. And, his coach that won all that championship still put pressure on Mike to say, here's what you're not doing right, and make him do it over and over, and gave him that tough feedback. So you're looking for a mentor who can coach you up and give you activity that you can actually go do. It's not about what's talked about, it's what's action on it, and you want something that's very pragmatic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I like the there's got to be a structured relationship. There's got to be a progression. There's got to be accountability. There's got to be, it's great to get all these ideas, but how do you take these ideas into I dids? How do you implement them? How do you hold accountable? How are you developing in a way that's building your repertoire that's allowing you to do that? The other thing that you mentioned, not directly, but I picked up on is I think there has to be value add from the mentee to the mentor, right? Like how are you adding, even if it's a gratitude that I'm helping somebody, right? Whatever that might be. I'm not looking for necessarily any, handouts or anything, but there has to be that strong relationship where they're walking in it together and there's growth on both sides. And I think that's valuable too, as you dive into it.
Chad, as usual, you really hit it down the fairway. Let's double click into that one. One of the things that I often tell people is, if mentoring is a formal exercise, you're not getting the best out of that relationship. It's got to be kind of organic. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things I've often used with my leaders that I work for is when we have our touch basis, I'll end the meeting with 3 ups and 3 downs. Hey, what are 3 things that I'm doing I need to magnify and keep doing? But what are 1 or 2 or 3 things that you want to see me work on and get better at? And oftentimes, as human beings, I grew up in public accounting. So we had to, from the time I was a first year, I had to walk into CFO's offices and tell them, you booked this the wrong way, you got to take this hit, you got this wrong. I learned pretty early in my career to give that kind of constructive and direct feedback. But for most people, even managers and leaders, it's hard. We don't want to offend anybody. But the thing that's most valued by people is knowing they're treated respectfully and fairly, but they're giving information to help them get better. One of the biggest mistakes I see among, particularly white male leaders, is they don't want a person of color or a woman coming in their office and crying or being offended because they're worried they're going to call HR. But the thing that usually minorities and women need the most is somebody they can trust that will actually talk honestly to them about where they've got gaps in their performance. So I say that because often when you start doing that with a leader, their first reaction is, oh, you're doing a great job, Chad. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And if you press them, all of a sudden things start coming out. That's where it becomes so fruitful, because they'll eventually say, well, you know what, Chad, there's one thing you're struggling with a little bit is you're not listening effectively in meetings. And you're a bright guy, but there's a lot still to be heard by other voices in the room, and you could get better community building if you would do that. That's constructive. That's helpful. That starts to open the dialogue. But the magic in it to build that rapport is invariably that leader will start to do reciprocity, because they'll look back at you and say, well, Chad, I appreciate that, but as a leader, what could I do better? Now you magnify and elevate the relationship to a whole different level. So my point in all that, trying to be clear here, is think about playing your career development on two levels. What you need that's obvious to you, but how are you managing the relationship to elevate it, that expands and accelerates the impact that your leader can make on you, because you build a different level of intimacy and trust in the relationship.
And I think that's key, right? Because it sometimes is difficult for people to be confident and comfortable to share some of those things with their leader. But when you create that intimacy and that trust, as you mentioned, it makes it easier. And now there's, again, we're walking in growth together, because we all have blind spots. We can all grow. And there's certain, definitely, I raise my hand. There's a lot of things I can work on. But having that ability to kind of have that two-way street, open communication, and comfort to do that, just creates a world of possibilities that aren't present if that's not the case in the relationship.
So well said. Totally agree with you.
Listen, we could dive into that for hours. Let me switch gears here for a second. Yeah. This is something that we a little bit talked off online, but this is more selfish for me, curiosity. I see you as a guy that is always, and I don't mean this negatively, but you're looking in the window a lot of the times. You're worried, you're developing people. You're helping grow people. You're worried about the brands that you represent. You're worried about, expanding the market share that you're doing. And what do you do, Steve, to look in the mirror, right? What does Steve do to take care of Steve, to stay sane? How do you make sure that, you're at your best and your tank is full? What are some of those tricks of the trade that keep you at your best so you can be at your best and serve the way that you like to serve?
Wow, what an awesome question. If we got in a time machine and went back 10, 15, 20 years ago, and you and I ran into me, we would both smack them in the face and say, wake up, dummy. I grew up with the idea that success was a function of how big my salary was and how large my house was and what kind of car I drove. And so I got very focused on materialism. And at one point in my career, I was making far beyond anything I expected, and I was living in a 7,000 square foot home. And when I sat down in my office at home one day, it hit me very clearly that I had material success, but I felt empty and I did not feel rewarded, and that I'd been chasing this idea of what success was, and I was completely wrong. So then that required me to ask a second question, and the second question was, what was the source of my identity? And I had determined that the source of my identity was a function of my materialism, but wasn't at the core of who I really was as a person and who I wanted to be. And it fundamentally changed the journey I went on. So I told you it'd be three things. Number one is, spiritually, my faith deepened, and it began to reshape my sense of identity. And it became less about me, and it became more about others. How could I help my family? How could I help my friends? How could I help my team? How could I make my community a better place? And ironically enough, the reward that I was getting from that was not only elevating me mentally and spiritually, but it was transforming how I thought about who I was every day. And probably one of the best books I ever read was a book called Thou Shalt Prosper. And it's written by Daniel Lapin. He's a rabbi and he's a business consultant in LA. And It basically demonstrates that commercial activity, being in business, is a noble pursuit because you're helping people live their lives better. So I had to get in touch with my identity. My spiritual life started to flourish. But I also realized I was out of balance. I didn't have harmony in my life. And I was too focused on, quite frankly, my career and not enough on my family. And ultimately, it cost me a marriage. And my greatest regret in my life, honestly, Chad, was not making my ex-wife feel important enough and elevating her. And because I was out of balance at home, it ultimately affected my career performance. And I didn't show up the way I needed to. So as I started that journey and change, I started thinking differently about my identity. But then I also realized I needed harmony in my life. And so my harmony came in a couple forms. Number one, I started to pursue my black belt in martial arts. And that physically and emotionally gave me a release that when I would bring that tension from work, I had a way of exerting that out. Also spent a lot of time in the gym, right? Physically getting my body in shape. And then third is knowing when I needed to hibernate, right? And the way I hibernate is, for example, when it's Friday at 5, I don't check emails. I don't do business on the weekend. That's family time. That's me time. Whether it's me reading, being on the water with my family, going to events. But all that being said, if I boil it down and for the listener, it's really three things. It's knowing the source of your identity. It's realizing you need physical, spiritual, and mental balance and harmony in your life. And then realizing that you're part of a greater good, and how do you plug in that to help you feel that reward? Because if all you're doing is chasing your career, you're going to get to the end of that road and realize that it's a false sense of security, and it's definitely not going to give you the joy you're expecting.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that answer. There's so much in that answer, and I think that a lot of people, and again, this is not a knock on anybody or that you're better than, but I think a lot of people walk around and they don't have that clarity of who they are, right?
Yeah.
They just don't know. They think they are. They want to be something where they want to be something, or project something that they think is success in society. But once you get really crystal clear on who you are and how you define success and what's important to you, nothing's easy, but it makes it easier to live into that. And at least self-audit, right? Like, how the hell am I doing? If this is really important to me, am I doing the things that allow, like the 5 o'clock, Friday at 5 o'clock, it's shutdown time? Am I living into that? And if I'm not, how do I get back off track? Because every once in a while we get out of balance. But the other thing that you said was, being, and again, here comes the word, but being really intentional about, and I think it's putting words in your mouth, but I think you're really intentional about where you spend your time and what you spend your time doing.
Yes.
Right. And so it's not, you're not just saying yes to everything. It's almost like Job said. I mean, sometimes the most powerful and successful thing you can do is say no to the things that don't necessarily live into that vision. And so because you got really clear on that, but you're right, we could all go back and slap ourselves 10 times over for the stupid stuff that we identified with maybe in the past.
I love what you're doing. And you know what? I'm going to throw something into our conversation.
Yeah.
Because we promised that we would be practical. And somebody hears me, oh yeah, you're living in a 7,000 square foot house and you're doing this and doing that, traveling all over the world. That's not me. Whether you're in your first year of your career or you're in the 20th part of your career, think about the transfer of skills between your personal life and your professional life. There's a bigger bridge than most people realize. I'm not getting paid for this, but literally I'm putting up the book Traction by Gino Wickman.
Yeah,
right?
great book. Yeah.
The reason I'm calling that out is it is probably one of the most fundamentally sound and value-driven models I've ever seen that could apply both to your personal life and your professional life. If you're out there and you're listening and you're thinking about whether it's advancing your career in your company or starting your own business, or maybe even you've already started your own business, it creates things that you and I are hitting on. It drives a clear sense of who you are, and you have to put it on paper and be intentional about what your business is going to be. Clear intention around the results you're expecting to get. And then it forces you to have an element of accountability, self-accountability, and team accountability that will keep you focused on the right things. And that's exactly what you and I are talking about. Do you know who you are? Are you being intentional about where you're spending your time? And do you know what success looks like? If you've got those three things in your personal life or your professional life, man, good things are going to happen. But it takes a little bit of work to do that. But once you do it, it's a powerful engine to create outcomes.
Yeah, and what I found, and I'm a betting man, I bet you found the same thing, is that if you have those three things and they're solid anchors, however you define success is just a byproduct of it. And it shows up, right? If it's money, if it's whatever it is, if it's more time, if it's more freedom. Like if I always tell people, like in sales, if money's something that you're after, chasing it doesn't happen. Add more value, solve bigger problems. The money will take care of itself. If you want more time freedom, do the right things and be intentional about those things. More time will show up. But when people try to chase those outcomes, ultimately they elude them. But you getting really focused on those things, and I'm like you. The material things were great at one time, and I'm blessed to have the things that I have. But I could live in a treehouse, man. I mean, I don't need all the additional shit. You know what I mean? So, and I realize that. But because both of us got really intentional about it, we have those options, that choices. So,
all right, Chad. So I think we should go on record that says if we get 100,000 followers listening to the Chad Carden Show, you and I have to live in a treehouse for a year and see how we do.
I love it. I love it. We'll do the podcast from the treehouse. Yeah.
You said something that I think if somebody's listening to this podcast and they're trying to glean the insights, the $1 million point you just made is worth everything. And that is, you said, if you're chasing money, don't focus on the money, focus on generating value.
Yeah.
The money is a byproduct of the value you create, but that is having the right lens. What breaks my heart for most people in life is they go through life and they never really stop and do any contemplation. Who am I? What am I trying to be? How am I trying to show up? What kind of husband do I want to be? What kind of teammate do I want to be? And when they're willing to have those honest conversations with themselves in those quiet moments, they're going to find some amazing things start to bubble up that help them start to understand the path they need to take. So your point there is gold about don't get focused on the material, get focused on value creation, and all those things will naturally flow from that.
Yeah, and you are the more self-reflection, the greater experience that I have with my own relationship. And I think that self-awareness is key. And it comes from 2 points. Again, you mentioned a little earlier, right? It's the blind spots that I don't have that somebody else is willing to tell me about, and me absorbing that and taking action on that. But the other one is that self-reflection, because it's sort of amazing what you can find out when you spend a little time with yourself. And I also believe that there was a study done, I think it was out in San Francisco University. You look it up, and I can post it, give you a link. But there was a study done that said most people are scared shitless to spend 15 minutes with themselves. Yeah. It was a shock study that said, and they shocked the people prior to, and they said, I would never want that shock again in my life. And so they put them in a room, and they gave the ability to shock themselves. They said you can either spend 15 minutes alone with your own thoughts, or you can shock yourself. After you just got shocked and said, I would never do that again, like 67% of men freaking shocked themselves within 10 minutes because it's so much noise and there's so much, they don't even know how to spend time. So once you can build that muscle and really be able to be honest and spend time with yourself, it opens up so many doors that, and I know you experience it. It's crazy. I wish more people would just buy into that and just explore that a little bit, because it's fascinating what can open up.
Oh man, that is good stuff. Let me build on that and see what your reaction is to this. That contemplation can be fueled by a recognition that in our culture, we have a tendency to want to get to the right answer. Think when we're kids in school, what's 2 + 2? Everybody wants, right. I get the answer, I get rewarded. Johnny, Chad's the smartest in the room. Good job, Chad. In an Eastern culture, it's not about the pursuit of the right answer, it's the pursuit of the right questions.
Yeah.
That changes your mindset. It forces you to ask some fundamental things. Not only do I have blind spots, but do I have built-in bias? Am I looking at everything the way I need to? Am I dealing with fears that are unfounded and I really shouldn't have those fears? These kind of big questions. Again, let's say you're a young director in a company and you want to get promoted to vice president, or you want to go off and start your own business. The power is in asking questions and then trying to work through those in an honest way versus rushing to trying to get to the right answer. And again, people are going to be laughing. We can post all these books that are out there, but somebody really wants to build this muscle. There's a great a book done by Matthew May called The Elegant Solution. And he taught on the faculty at Toyota. Toyota is recognized as one of the most innovative companies in the world. They took Lean and Six Sigma and elevated it up to what they call system thinking. The whole focus is to drive out bias and a perception that you got everything figured out. It actually celebrates digging in and exploring things, and they give you all kinds of practical tools how to solve for that. I've used it on my teams, and it's created breakthrough innovation, but it starts with pursuing the right question. Let me give you a quick example on this. So oftentimes when we're dealing with a new strategy, a new project, a customer problem, you name it, I will get the team together, and for 10 minutes minimum, I facilitate it, so I get to shut my mouth, and all we can do on the topic is ask questions. There's no debate, there's no solution, it's just questions. What typically happens, this is a technique that Toyota uses for innovative thinking. A couple things come out of it. Number one is usually in the first 5 minutes, there's rapid fire. And what's cool is collaboratively, everybody in the room is hearing and they riff off each other. Ooh, I hadn't thought about that. Here's another question. Then at about 5 minutes, I see this over and over, the group goes quiet because now their higher gear is kicking and their higher thinking. And they're taking that base set of questions and they're ratcheting up to another round of questions. Then usually in the last 3 minutes, you start getting hit with deeper questions. Why is that important? Because number one is you're retraining the organization, the team, not to go after the solution, but figure out all the things that could go wrong, all the things we're not thinking about. And then invariably what ends up happening is you usually get 3 to 5 pillars of themes that all those questions come on. And you know what the practical benefit is? For the project manager and the leader in the group, you pretty much have just created a roadmap of the time and action, how to go attack a problem.
Yeah.
So that book is, if anybody was to follow that book, it would encapsulate a lot of things you and I have been talking about today about how to create accountability, how to create discipline, how to be contemplative and think through things, but do it in a way that creates really powerful output.
Man, that, again, this is so rich. And again, this is like probably 1 of 10, hopefully, if you'll come back.
I'll come back anytime, man. Love it.
We have a few more minutes, and I want to dive into a couple different things. So talk to us a little bit about, because I know it's still in the infancy stages, but you're really gaining momentum and really, I mean, I don't think I say this lightly. I mean, you're ahead of the game with a lot of people with the TikTok shop and leveraging that marketplace. Give us a little bit of insight to that. Selfishly for me, again, I mean, even for me, I mean, I'm curious on how do you create more awareness and engagement and revenue through those channels? And obviously you're doing it.
Yeah. Well, I'd say the first thing, if anybody wants follow-up on any of this, particularly on the TikTok side, I'm out on LinkedIn. When you listen to podcasts, you want to connect, shoot me on LinkedIn. Selfishly, I've been on the treadmill over the last 2 months as Chad and I've started working on this, and I've listened to all the podcasts, and I've linked in with a lot of his guests, right? It's always powerful to have those networks. Practically speaking on TikTok, what's amazing is it's growing 4 times faster than Amazon.
Wow.
It is on track to be a $90 billion segment in the United States in the next 2 to 3 years. 25% of what gets sold is in cosmetics and beauty. Despite what most people think, all generations are shopping on it, all the way from grandmas at 65, all the way down to 15-year-old girls and boys. And what is happening is it's a retail engine that's unlike anything in the market. Whereas when you go on Amazon or Walmart.com or a direct-to-consumer site, you're going there usually, for the most part, to just convert and buy something. TikTok operates simultaneously both as a top-of-the-funnel brand awareness and product awareness engine, as well as a conversion engine. And what's blown us away is that the experience has been so good on TikTok that 1 out of 4 customers are coming back and rebuying on the shop for the brand. And 83% of consumers are coming back to TikTok and rebuying again and again.
Wow.
So it's a very powerful tool. And what we are finding, and I have a little fun with you, is when we first started selling on TikTok 2 years ago, items would sell and be viral. So teach your audience a couple things. The TikTok team uses a term called cold start. So if we created the new Chad Carden men's fragrance brand, right? Hottest thing out there, we think. When we launch it, until it gets to about $3,000 a day, it's in what's called cold start. Most brands never got out of cold start because they don't have the right marketing partner, they don't have the right value proposition, they don't have the right storefront. But the brands that do it right, like our brands, they get out of cold start usually within 3 to 6 months, and now they're selling 3 to 4,000 a day. They're doing $1 million a year. But you have the potential to do tens of millions of dollars. So now you got to get to go viral and hyper viral. How do you do that? There's 3 ways. You do live events on TikTok. Live events are the digital version of like the Home Shopper Network. Hey, hi, this is Steve Light. We're selling the new Chad Carden fragrance, and it smells so good, and you buy on that. The second thing is your agency will build content. They'll build videos and things like that for the brand. But the most powerful engine is what they call affiliates. And affiliates are essentially influencers. And they designated them L6 to L1. L1 would be somebody who's got a couple hundred followers and doesn't have a lot of impact. And L6 would be like a Khloe Kardashian who's got millions of followers. When they start doing about 75% of your content, your sales take off. And now we actually see when something goes viral, it'll sell at 5 to 20 times its daily rate for 4 or 5 months at a time. Wow. So it is, the growth is explosive. And by the way, it's everything from pet product to automotive parts to fragrances. There's a great case study out there. Frito-Lay's was brilliant with this. They did regional chip flavors and sold them on TikTok. So they had certain flavors for the Southeast. They became collector's editions and they sold out overnight. So I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but effectively, if you wrap it up, TikTok is the fastest growing marketplace in the world. It does something that no other marketplace can do, and that is create brand awareness and conversion at the same time. And 3 is there is a very strong playbook to win on it, and you're seeing a lot of brands, both legacy brands, big CPGs you would know today, but upstarts and brand new, what they call digitally native brands starting, and they're just creating a whole new business cases that are just causing their business to absolutely explode. Give you some framework. We had zeroed this business 3 years ago, Chad, and we'll do close to 8 figures on TikTok this year.
So my question is, where it's at currently, are brands flooding to it, or is it still early adopters and people are late to come to the party? Where is the cycle there?
You get 3 types. You got brands that are digitally native and they've used it to grow their brand, and now they've expanded to brick and mortar. That's, I'll call it 10% of the marketplace. The other 90% are brands that you and I would know, like a P&G or a Unilever or a L'Oreal. There's really 2 sides of the coin. Some of them are smart and have been in it early, and they've adopted it and are growing and they're learning. Other brands there's a lot of brands still sitting on the sidelines. They don't understand how to do it, and that's where we've been helping them. The biggest challenge for them, and this would be a whole episode that we don't have the time to click into today, in the marketplaces world like Amazon and Walmart, it's very difficult to make money for a brand. And the reason it is because they've set an expectation of the consumer that there's free shipping. And so that eats up a lot of the profit in that last mile. In the TikTok world, 1 out of every 2 customers pays for shipping, and it changes the economic model entirely. So you have to help a brand understand that you can actually make money in the e-com world, where for the last 20 years, it's always been, I've got to be there, but I can't make money. That's why a lot of brands are on the sideline, because they don't know any better.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to wrap this one up, and hopefully again, we can cut this if you don't want me to say this, but
yeah.
Number one is, if you're looking to get into the TikTok brand and you have the resources and means to do it, Steve is obviously your best resource, in my opinion. I mean, just look at the 5 minutes that he explained it right there. And so find him on LinkedIn. If you're looking, a lot of our listeners are thought leaders and looking for ways to continuously make sure that they're staying ahead of the game. Again, Steve being in your network is, again, I think Steve and I connected maybe 3 or 4 months ago, and he's already added more value to me than I have to him. So I want to say, publicly, thank you, Steve, for that. But, connect with him. I mean, he's always looking for ways to continuously build bridges, build strong relationships that are authentic, that can help create win-win, what I see as a win-win opportunities. Win for the person, you, win for, Steve's going to win in this thing. And it's not necessarily monetarily. It's just, how do we win and how do we help continue to, rising tide raises all ships. And so that's the guy that I see Steve is. So, Steve, I appreciate you being on this episode. Again, we need to have you back and click on all these things and continue the journey. But I do appreciate what you said earlier, is that our goal, me and you especially, mine with every guest, but me and you especially, and you're aligned to this, is bringing practicality bringing reality, maybe talking about shit that people don't want to talk about, right? I mean, maybe bringing that stuff to the forefront. And so I really appreciate that, that openness to do that. So until next time, buddy, have a good one. I know you got to get back to it, and I appreciate you joining.
Thanks. Good seeing you. We'll talk soon. Bye, everybody.